Single dad protects woman from two attackers in toilet. 30 seconds later, they learned he was Navy. The night began like a quiet sigh in a city that had grown too used to danger. But inside a dimly lit rest stop hallway, something was about to happen that would shake every person who witnessed it. It started when a single dad, exhausted from a long day's road trip with his 10-year-old daughter, pushed open the restroom door and heard the kind of sound no decent human could ignore: muffled whimpers, frantic shuffling, and the unmistakable tone of fear trembling inside a woman's breath. In that moment, everything inside him sharpened, as if the years he had spent trying to forget the battlefield suddenly woke up in full force. He stepped forward, not knowing that within the next 30 seconds, two men who thought they owned the night would learn a truth they never expected. The quiet man they saw was once Navy, trained for storms far darker than anything they could imagine. If you believe in kindness, bravery, and second chances, make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe to KandHStories. It helps the channel reach more hearts like yours. Ethan Cole had been fighting invisible wars long before this night. On the surface, he was simply a single father trying to rebuild life after losing his wife to an unexpected illness 2 years earlier. The grief still clung to him like a shadow, quiet and persistent, shaping every decision he made for his daughter Emma. Every road trip, every stop, every small attempt at normalcy was his way of trying to stitch together a life that didn't quite fit anymore. But even on the hardest days, he pressed forward because Emma deserved a father who tried, even when he felt broken beneath his calm exterior. They had left home early that morning to visit Emma's grandparents in another city. It was supposed to be a simple trip to give Emma some joy and to allow Ethan a few days of rest. By the time they reached the rest area miles away from home, dusk had dipped the sky into a smoky blend of purple and blue. Traffic had thinned. The air had grown colder. Ethan carried a heavy weariness in his bones, the kind that didn't come from driving but from the emotional weight of holding both fatherhood and grief on his shoulders. Emma ran to the vending machines with cheerful delight while Ethan headed toward the restrooms. That was when it happened, the moment that twisted his stomach into a tight knot and awakened the part of him he had tried to bury. The sound of distress wasn't loud, but it was sharp enough for a man trained to detect danger. His instincts surged awake. Memories of night drills, rescue missions, and the deepest parts of military discipline flashed through his mind. He knew instantly that something was wrong. And though his heart hammered, his expression stayed still, controlled, and centered, the way he had been trained years ago before life had taken him far from the Navy. He stepped inside quietly, calculating everything in seconds. The muted fluorescent lights flickered slightly. The cold tiles echoed every motion. At the far end of the room, the women's restroom entrance door was slightly ajar, and the muffled cries were coming from inside. For a split second, he told himself he could call someone else, alert security, grab someone nearby, but no. He understood how fast moments like this could turn fatal. Waiting wasn't an option. He moved forward with a steady determination, pushing the door open just enough to see what was happening. Inside, a young woman in her 20s was cornered by two men who towered over her. Their bodies blocked the exit, and their intentions were written in their smirking faces and aggressive posture. The fear in her eyes was unmistakable, desperate, pleading, silently begging for someone to help before it was too late. Ethan didn't hesitate. 30 seconds. That was all it took. The training he thought he had left behind roared back through his body like a storm. He stepped inside the room with a calmness that was terrifying in its own way. The men turned, annoyed at the interruption, not knowing who they were facing. Ethan struck with the precision of a man who had spent years in service. He used their size against them, redirecting their weight, knocking one into the wall and twisting the arm of the other before he had time to react. In less than half a minute, the two attackers were on the floor, groaning and unable to stand, staring up at him with the dawning realization that this was no ordinary bystander. When they demanded to know who he was, the answer slipped out of him with quiet power: he had once served in the Navy. A man who had protected strangers before, a man who had faced storms far worse than anything they could bring. And tonight, he protected again. The woman, later he would learn her name was Lila, was shaking uncontrollably, overwhelmed by shock and relief. He guided her gently out of the restroom, making sure she could stand on her own, staying beside her the way someone once stayed beside his wife when she needed help. Emma noticed immediately that something was wrong and rushed over, clutching her father's arm with worried eyes. Ethan knelt down, reassuring her softly, hiding the tremors still running through his body. He didn't want her to see the darkness he had witnessed. He didn't want her to absorb the fear he fought so hard to keep from her. Security arrived minutes later. Police soon followed. Statements were taken, and the attackers were taken into custody. Through it all, Lila stayed close to Ethan, not because she needed protection anymore, but because she felt safer near a man whose entire presence radiated the quiet strength she had prayed for in her moment of terror. As the chaos settled, something unexpected began to unfold, not loud, not dramatic, but gentle. Lila noticed the way Ethan looked at his daughter with soft eyes, the way he carried his grief quietly but still poured love into every moment he shared with Emma. She saw his exhaustion and his courage woven together, forming a man who didn't brag about saving lives, who didn't want applause, who simply acted because it was the right thing to do. They sat together on a bench outside the rest stop, waiting for the last bit of paperwork to finish. The air had grown colder, but the silence between them felt warm. Lila talked about her life, working 2 shifts, traveling alone, trying to build something better after her own series of heartbreaks. No one had ever defended her like that before. No one had risked themselves so silently and selflessly. Ethan listened quietly. He never intended to connect with anyone new. His heart still carried the imprint of his late wife. But loneliness had been gnawing at him for years, and in Lila's kind voice and gentle presence, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: ease, understanding, and a quiet sense of belonging he didn't dare name. The night stretched longer as they waited for the police to finish clearing them. Emma sat between them, swinging her feet, slowly warming up to Lila as she realized the woman wasn't just someone her father helped, she was someone who looked at them both with gratitude and kindness. A spark formed there, small but undeniable. When everything was finally done, Ethan prepared to leave, but Lila gently asked if she could exchange contacts with him, not out of obligation, but out of genuine appreciation. She wanted to thank him properly. She wanted to stay connected to the man who changed the course of her life in 30 seconds. Ethan hesitated, but something inside him, maybe hope, maybe healing, pushed him to say yes. Over the following weeks, their connection blossomed slowly. Not rushed, not forced. Ethan found himself opening up in ways he hadn't expected, sharing pieces of his past, his Navy years, his grief. Lila, in turn, shared her pain, her struggles, her dreams. Emma grew fond of her, sensing a warmth she had been missing since her mother passed. Lila never tried to replace anyone, she simply added light to places still dim. Ethan realized something profound: sometimes life gives a person a second chance in the most unexpected places. A rest stop, a moment of danger, a spark in the darkness. He saved Lila that night, but in many ways, she was saving him too. As months passed, their bond deepened into something real, something healing, something that felt like a